Great. So welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to my talk. I mean, it's amazing to see so many people are here to watch me give a talk in a cinema theater. It's always fun to see that big screen behind you. No pressure at all. So today, what I'm going to be talking about is what are the essentials for building and leading highly effective development teams. Firstly, a little bit about me is I'm Tugberk. I love creating products and making impact on people's life. And you can find me on Twitter as well. So most of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about here is based on my experience at the company that I work for called Redgate. So I worked there as a technical lead of a software development team. And what Redgate does is that we create tools for Microsoft data platform professionals to make their jobs a bit easy to work with databases like SQL Server. As it is, I think, as I'm going to be talking about my experience leading a product team at Redgate, I think it's really important for you to understand a bit more about the company, because then you can take it with a pinch of salt. Because what I believe is that there is no cookie-cutter approach to leadership, so it's only valid within a context. So I want to tell you a little bit about my context, actually. So when you look a little bit closely at Redgate with numbers, it's a pretty mature company. We have been out there for 18 years. There are nearly 300 employees. We care a lot about continuous delivery. So we have released more than 1,000 times last year. So we released to customer machines. So it's not a hosted system we have. So it's a bit challenging there, but we are trying to face that challenge as well. And we drink a lot of cup of coffee, as you can see on the top left. So that's it. So this is the company that I work for. And then the experience that I'm going to be telling you today is going to be based on that. But before we start, quickly checking, how many of you guys are actually doing software engineering, software development? Cool, nearly everyone. How many of you have a leadership role within the team or a manager role? Okay, nearly half of the room as well. So let's start with a very simple question. What is the goal of the development team? Can anyone wants to give me an answer to this? What is the general goal of a development team? Anyone? Solve problems. Great. What else? Earn money. If you are a non-profit organization, that might be hard. I would say release product. Cool. Yeah, it's very, very close answers. I think what I believe is that the goal of the software development team, in a generic way, when you look at it, is to solve the right problems for the business and users. So you might think that, okay, software development team is there to write the code, but you might be mistaken, because you are writing the code to solve the problems for your business and your users. You are not writing code for the sake of writing it. So your job is not to write the code, but your job is to solve the problems for the business and users. So this is very important, because this is the heart of the topic that I want to talk about today, which is around effectiveness. But first, I think we should understand effectiveness a little bit, what that means. So when you look at its exact definition in the dictionary, it says effectiveness is the degree in which something is successful in producing a desired result. Makes sense, kind of. So I think what I take away from this is that this is caring a lot about the success at the end. So you are trying to achieve something with a minimum effort. So this is your effectiveness. So there is a little bit of a nuance here, though, that you shouldn't be mistaken. You shouldn't be mixing the effectiveness with efficiency. Efficiency is a total different thing. So you might be producing 1,000 lines of code, and I might be going. And then in a week, I will be sitting on my desk and writing 10 lines of code, and I would achieve the same result as you are achieving in a week. and I'm going to win because I have written 10 lines of code and you have written 1,000 lines of code. It doesn't mean that I'm a bad software developer. It doesn't mean that you are a bad software developer. You are very productive. You are very efficient in your job because you are writing a lot of code. But possibly there is a bit of a nuance there that something is different in those words. And then I think that today's talk is going to reveal what that is. And when you look at the efficiency here, it's act of performing or functioning in the best possible manner with the least waste of time and effort. So this cares a lot about wasting the time and effort. So there's a big difference there. But you can actually summarize this with these nice words, which I found on this thing called internet. Being effective is about doing the right things, and while being efficient is about doing the things right. So this is a really, really good, I think, summary of what this is. So we kind of understand here that we want to do things for the business. We want to solve problems for the business, and we want to solve the right problems for the business. But how do we know that actually we are doing the right thing for the business? That's I think we have that very ambiguous definition to a development team, right? We are narrowing it down now. We kind of defined it that we want to solve the right problems, but how are we going to know that we are solving the right problems, right? It might be different to each of you that you are maybe doing the things right, you are not doing the things right. And I think there are two aspects here that we should be looking into, though. I think one of them is about setting the objective. So you got to be able to understand that you want to achieve something at the end of your effort. And then the other thing is around how are you going to execute on that? How are you going to achieve that result? What is your way of achieving that outcome? So we will talk about those aspects and then what are the interesting bits and pieces in there that will make a team effective. So I want to start with the objective setting part. So before you are formed as a team, right? You are a product team. You have software engineers. You possibly have user experience designers in the team, possibly a tech lead, maybe an engineering manager as well. Depends on your company structure and organizational structure. But what should be actually common there is that once that team is formed, you should have a sense of purpose. So if you ask every member in the team that why that team exists, everyone should give you a crystal clear definition of why that team exists. So if you can't answer this question collectively, you should take a step back and try to explain this. Because if you don't know why you are existing there, how are you going to actually come up with the objective that you want to solve at the end of the day? Again, this depends very much on the structure of your organization as well. Some organizations could be giving you the objective at the same time, but some organizations gives the teams more autonomy and then expects you to actually get on with the work. They define you the strategy, give you direction, but they don't tell you how to solve those problems and even what problems to solve. It's only about this is this market that we think is valid for us to go and work on, or this is the infrastructure that we want to actually improve on, things like that. So you have your sense of purpose, right? Everyone is able to explain, what they are doing, why they are there. But where do you go from here, though, right? So so you have your sense of purpose. You kind of know, what you want to achieve. So an example to this might be that you are formed as a product. So my product team is formed to address the data privacy and protection market. So we have been set out there as this market is proving to be valuable with the new regulatory pressures coming up. It's becoming hard for people to actually move data around and then understand what that data means. So this was our purpose, to go and be successful in this business. And then from that point on, we didn't know the domain. We didn't know anything about the how we can actually achieve that. We had some direction, but we only had assumptions. Because humans make assumptions, right? Every day we make assumptions. Even in our day-to-day job, sometimes in our when we are writing code, we are assuming things, and this is very important to I think emphasize because assumptions are really good way to get on with your life. Because otherwise, you would be questioning everything to every detail. So there is a fine degree here that it is actually the great way to get on with your life. But sometimes, when you make a wrong assumption, if you rely on that for all other assumptions, then everything is going to fall apart. So your job here is to basically understand what those assumptions are initially, and then try to de-risk them one by one. So to understand that, how you can actually go about and then try to de-risk them is another topic. So there is a technique called assumption mapping. How many of you guys have heard of assumption mapping before? Anyone? Cool. No one. Okay, this is going to be valuable. If you're going to take away one thing, take away this thing. Assumption mapping is a really, really useful, valuable technique. So this is supposed to be done as a team activity. So you basically get into a room, try to come up with your assumptions. There is this grid, and then this grid is basically the impact if we are wrong. What is the impact of the assumption if we are wrong? And possibility of assumption being wrong. And when you look at the right top corner here, those are your riskiest assumptions. And you can actually do this exercise like this as well, and then you come up with the numbers. Then viewing it like that makes a lot of more sense, because then you can look at the right corner, and then you are going to see your riskiest assumptions. But how does this actually have an impact on the effectiveness? So you might be asking yourself, right? So this has a really good effect, because now we had a purpose. We want to set ourselves objectives, but we don't even know what we are going to be doing. So you have some assumptions. Those assumptions could be around the product direction or the project direction, or maybe it's about technical choices that you want to make. So all of those things could be assumptions, and then some of them has a high risk of failing, right? For example, if I go and make an assumption today that no one is going to be using Internet Explorer for the rest of their lives. That's an assumption, right? That might be a very good assumption based on the pains that we have had as web developers for years. But we got to prove that that's actually the right assumption to make, because then I will build every software on top of this assumption, and then I'm not going to be supporting IE. But when I actually ship this, my customers would go, "You don't support IE, we are not going to buy this." So you got to actually understand that. And then there are some validation techniques to actually help you do this. But it's not really easy at some levels. Like technical stuff is mostly easy. It's like binary answers you can go and ask people. Like in the IE example that I gave, Internet Explorer example, you could be talking to your users saying that, do you use Internet Explorer? They could be saying yes, no, binary. But some of them are harder things to validate actually, mostly around like, whether a problem exists in the market or not. But as I mentioned, I think there are techniques here that we have been using at Redgate. And I believe this could give you a guidance on whenever you come up with this type of challenges. But you can break these techniques into two different categories. So one of them is being qualitative techniques. So qualitative is information that cannot be actually measured. So it's basically like, you are speaking to someone, you're getting some information from them, things like that. So you can't actually put a number on it. I mean, you could be doing some analysis on it and then distilling it down to something that is meaningful to you at the end of the day. But again, it's going to be an interpretation of what you heard, actually. So some of the really good techniques, qualitative techniques, starts with talking to your users. So pretty much, all of you here works within a product team, I assume, as a software engineer or as a manager or as a leader. So how many of you actually speak to your users weekly? Your users might be external or might be internal. How many of you speak to your users monthly? 2 months? 3 months? Once a year? Okay. So I think what you should all do is that when you get out of this conference, go and start talking to your users, because you might find really, really interesting things from them. Because essentially what you are trying to do is you are trying to solve problems for users, right? But how are you going to solve them if you don't know what their problems are? And also there is a little bit of a nuance here as well, that sometimes users might not be able to tell you the right things. So there is a nice quote here. So this is from someone really famous. If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Do you know who said this? Ford. But maybe. So there is also a myth going around that Henry Ford actually didn't say this. But it's a good quote anyway, so I'm going to take it. So that you could take this to the total different wrong way. You could say that, okay, I'm not going to talk to users. They're not going to tell me what they want, right? They won't know what they want because they are paying me to actually solve the problems for them. But you have a nice word there, problem, right? So users will usually tell you what features they want. And then they keep telling you because that's how they engage with it. But what you need to do as that, the coordinator of that conversation, you got to understand what the problem is behind that. So you might be going and understanding the why behind it. And then that's how you actually get to the problem at the end of the day. And there's a really nice book here. I'm not sure if you have heard this before, called Mom Test. So this is a very thin book that you can actually read in 2 or 3 hours time. And it gives you really nice techniques to actually be able to talk to your users. It essentially comes from the idea of you have an iPad application for recipes, right? You go to your mom and say, Mom, I have an iPad application that I'm building now for recipes. Would you like that? Your mom says, yes, because you're my son and I love recipes. Once you build it, once you get it to your mom, and then your mom is never using it because, well, it is, her hands are, wet when she's cooking. And she doesn't really need a recipe book because everything she knows by heart, right? Then you basically fail. You wasted your time. And these are actually understanding what questions to ask so that you can understand actually whether a problem actually exists there. So it's a really, really good book. There is another technique called Jobs to be Done that gives you a different perspective on the problems as well. So Intercom has a really nice book on this. So this has been out there for years. But it hasn't actually been done in the software industry that well. Used that well. So Intercom actually written a book to apply this to software industry as well. So it gives you a different perspective on what are your competitors are. Because users at the end of the day buy your products or use your services to actually solve, do a job, get a job done at the end of the day. So it might give you a different perspective on the things. There's quantitative aspects as well. So quantitatives are this is what we should all love as software engineers because these are numbers, right? We can represent them as numbers and then make decisions easier. And there is another technique here called hypothesis-driven development. How many of you actually heard about this before? Cool. A few people. This is also known as outcome-driven development at some levels. But let's start talking about this with a user story. User story, I'm assuming lots of people are familiar with what this is. It's basically representing what you want to do within this type of structure as who, I want to what, and then because why. And this really gives you an understanding of what you actually want to do, emphasizes what you want to actually get out of it. So you can represent this as as a student or professional, I want to search for language schools so that I can find the best schools suited to my needs based on schools, prices, location, and other criteria. So this is a user story, right? But what's wrong with this one? Anyone tell me what is actually wrong with this statement?
It has perspective of two different users, a student and professor.
Yeah, could be a good point. But what I was trying to actually highlight here is that this is a confidence statement. So it makes an assumption again here is that this is actually something that's valuable to do. It doesn't highlight here inside it whether that assumption actually validated or not as well. So that has this notion in it. And when you look at the hypothesis, definition of an hypothesis, it is actually you are starting with an idea. You have some limited evidence. You are basing it on that proposition. And then you are trying to further, support further investigating that. And you can represent the same thing with a hypothesis card. And this is the structure that you can find it on ThoughtWorks website. It's a really good one. And then writing the same thing in different ways. But it's highlighting what the outcome that you want to achieve at the end of the day. So you can write this as we believe that a language SQL search capability will result in users engaging with the search form to find language schools based on their criteria. We will know that we have succeeded when 40% of the users uses the search out of at least 50 unique users. So it's very, very outcome-centric. It tells you like what outcome you are trying to achieve here and what things are known, what things are not known. And so this was actually from a real-world example that was my wife's business was a language school consultation, and there was a website that we built together, and then we came up with these hypotheses because we didn't know the market at all. So we had a limited budget as well, so our way of testing these was basically let's do Google AdWords. It's not always the right way to do, but that was the best way for us based on the constraints that we had. And in here, it doesn't matter what you use as well. Like, based on your hypothesis, you got to find out what the best impact is. Then the results came up with the 2 days experiment. There was 54 users, unique users, came to the website. 37 of them search, and then 5 searches per session. So I'm finding some side effects as well that I didn't want to actually find out before, right? So 5 searches per session came out from that. But I didn't care about that initially. That wasn't inside my hypothesis. But it's kind of coming up as a side effect to me as well. But this is lower than what the target was, right? So should I throw this away now, idea? No, because it's a close match. So I'm going to be looking for other things. So this actually made us go and look at the heat map as well. So we use something called Hotjar to actually get the heat map of the visitors inside the website. And once you look at it, you will see that everything is nearly around the search box as well. So this validated our hypothesis of this is actually a familiar concept to the users. They know of this concept from hotel searches, flight searches, and that should be familiar to them. So we just made this assumption and then went with it with a hypothesis and then actually validated that as well. So from this point on, you have a lot of confidence that this is actually the right thing to do. You are not going to be in dark in the wild. You will just know that this is the right thing to do. You will invest effort onto this. So what was the question? Would users engage with this search functionality on the site? The answer is yes. But this is a cut-down version of a talk I did previously at a conference as well. So you can go and watch this from this link if you want to find more about how you should be developing products under uncertainty, things like that. But this is again giving you an idea of once you start out, how can you validate those assumptions and how can you actually be confident that you are actually doing the right thing. Let's jump onto the other side, like execution side of this picture. So again, let's look at what we were trying to find out, right? How do we know that we are doing the right thing? So we are a software development team. We want to find out that whether we are doing the right thing, and we look at the objective setting aspect of it. But there is the execution side of it as well, and this matters a lot. Because you will only know whether you are doing the right thing or not if you only have an empowered and caring team. So today's keynote was really good, on point about this topic as well. So it's you as a product team or development team should have the autonomy and all of the empowerment that you go and solve the problems as well. And the given example in the keynote was that you want to use some technology or you want to use a pattern in your services, in your software, go and use it. But once it actually fails, you are the one responsible for that, or the whole team is responsible for that. So you are putting everyone in the team at risk by doing something like that. So it's basically giving you the autonomy, but at the same time, it's giving you the accountability as well. So this is a really good way of actually finding out that whether you are on the right track. Because once you have this type of team structure, everyone is basically trying to be a police within the team. So you don't have one bottleneck as a leader. Everyone is the leader in the team now. But there's a framework called the 5 Dysfunctions of a team. So this is a really good framework. So as a leader, you should be looking at signals for whether you are actually whether you are actually missing any of these things. So absence of trust comes at the very bottom, and then the very important thing. If there is no trust within the team or a little trust, then everything is going to fall apart. And then the fear of conflict. These things you should be able to talk about things freely within the team environment without actually, being afraid of the conflicts. And then accountability, avoidance of accountability is a really important one as well. And then the inattention to results as well. So all of these are signals that you actually have a right, structure within the team. It's a really, really good guidance as a leader to you as well. But let's look at you as a leader, because some of you act as a leader within your teams, and I assume some of you also want to take that job as well. And let's look at it a bit more closely though. But one thing to emphasize here is that if you don't want to care the rest of it, just care about this. So when you are a software developer, your impact is still there. You have still an impact. But once you are acting as a leader within a team, now your impact is amplified. Any word that you say, anything that you do might affect something else. So you have a further knock-on effect on whatever you do. And before starting, diving into this, I want to actually do a little exercise to, understand a bit more about the details here. And for that, I need 2 volunteers from the audience here. So what are we going to do is one audience will be lying down here. Don't worry, I brought my yoga mat here, so you are not going to be lying down here. And the other audience is trying to get that person stand up. So I need 2 volunteers now. Who wants to come? Come on, no one? 2 volunteers, please. Please. Cool. That gentleman. One more? Nice. Cool. So one of you should be lying down here. And then so what you should be doing is that you should not do anything apart from this gentleman says, right? So if this gentleman tells you, stand your right hand, you will stand your right hand, do nothing else. So your job here is to just tell him the instructions. You can't tell him, get up. That doesn't work like that, right? So you will tell him instructions to get him up. So think about that. You are him and what you would do. Start. Go.
Can you sit, please?
That doesn't work. You need to give specific instructions.
Can I move him myself?
No, doesn't work.
Can you try curl from your head up?
That's physically impossible. You see, nice ideas coming up.
Any more ideas? Why?
Okay, I think we kind of proved the point. So can we just change positions now? And then you go there, and then what you are going to be doing is that you try to stand up. You sit down and by yourself try to stand up. How easy was that? Well, that was the exercise. Thanks a lot. So why did we do that? That seems stupid, right? So the main idea here is this, right? So you saw how it was easy for the gentleman to actually get up. But he wasn't able to give instructions. It was proven a bit hard as well. And he tried that, but once he was giving the instructions as well, it didn't really work out, because now you have a very different perspective here as well. So you might be thinking as a leader that you have a lot of responsibility. You need to hold everyone's hand. You need to make them do stuff because you got to be knowing everything here, right? That's not how it works. Leadership is not about you knowing everything. Even if you know everything, giving instructions is just going to fail you from the day one, as we have seen. But this is our instinct, because we have been, as a software engineers, we are just very used to these type of ideas, right? Trying to do stuff one by one, things like that. But as a leader, what you are is you are an enabler, right? Within the team, within the business as well. So what you are going to be doing in everyday job is to spot signals and then try to help people. What this means in practice is actually asking the right questions usually, rather than telling them what they should be doing, right? So this is a very interesting mentality, and it takes getting used to as well, because as I mentioned, I think as software engineers, we have a different mental model, but as an individual contributor. Once we actually get into the leadership positions, then it becomes a different challenge. So your life as a software engineer is very much in the I'm going to get my tasks done. I will write this code, try to test it, see if it will pass my CI server, things like that, and whether I can maintain this or not. Do I have a tech debt, things like that. So all of those are your problems, right? These are the things that you care about. But if you are in a right empowered team, you will still act as a leader. You will still try to spot problems, but you're kind of like living in your silo, usually with your headphones on, trying to get your job done. And you can make an impact like that, definitely. But technical leadership is so much different to that. So it's you are there to support the team. You are there to actually give the team that understanding of what you are trying to achieve, set the direction, and then give them help, and then give them confidence at the same time as well. And starting here should be starting with establishing that shared ownership within the team. And this is going to make a lot of impact on the effectiveness of the team as well. Because once you have this type of shared ownership within the team, everyone looks after each other. Because anything that Mark does here affects me, and it affects Chris as well there. So you are caring about the team. You are trying to understand what the things that I am doing will affect the other people within my team as well. And again, it takes getting used to establish this as well. But you got to be able to ask the right questions here. So coaching techniques helps a lot here. For example, there's a nice coaching model called Grow model. So that type of things will help you to actually ask the right questions whenever the timing is right, for example. But once you have that shared ownership within the team, and you don't want to also have a fear of conflict as well, and there's a dilemma here, because you will be hearing a lot of opinions, right, within the team. So everyone has their own opinions on the things. And sometimes, this is all, you have the shared opinion about something. But most of the time, these are different opinions. This could be about what technology we should use, what type of problem we should solve. This customer told us this, should we build that, things like that. And this is where opinions versus principles come. So if you have a principled mindset within the team or within yourself as well, then these type of stuff becomes easy. And there's a very, very big risk here for the team here as well, is that once you actually get into this position, if you defer making decisions, because it's like there are a lot of opinions and you just don't want to make decisions, then you will take a risk here by making that decision. I mean, you could be explicitly deferring it, saying that we are not going to do anything about it because it doesn't make sense, or you have evidence to make that decision, but you got to be able to make it based on something, and you can't just implicitly defer it. And so so this is an example from one of the projects that we are working on at Redgate called Mosaic. So before we start doing that, it has an effect on a lot of products at Redgate. And we wanted to establish some principles, because now you are talking about something across the teams, not about one team. Then we wanted to establish these principles beforehand. So, for example, these are very simple principles on embracing the change, minimizing the process, going fast, appearing as one product, and learning quickly. So whenever we are going to be making decisions, we are going to be judging them based on these, right? So if I want to do something, if that is not complicating the process, then there is a judgmental criteria there is whether we should not do that. You are talking in that mindset now, rather than talking about hey, Chris said this is the right thing, and then Mark said this is the wrong thing. Let's just do what Mark says because he is more handsome. It doesn't work like that. So you got to be able to have this type of principles in your mind, and share them within the team as well. So it doesn't also work like if you have these principles and if you keep it to yourself, it doesn't work like that. You got to share it with the team. You got to have a shared understanding about this as well. So you can't come up with on your own. You got to come up with this with the team as well, and that's another challenging thing to do. But it has a lot of effect on the team's ability to make impact. And there's a really good blog post that's written by our head of product delivery at Redgate, Chris Smith, has written how do you scale leadership. So scaling the leadership is a total different story. And there's a really detailed blog post that I encourage you to go and check it out. Mostly talks about the ideas that we have been talking about, but it goes a bit more in detail on them. But so when we are going back to that story of like effectiveness, you got to be understanding, where the team is every day and what problems they have. And they, every people in the team are, individual. They have their own problems. They have their own, mental model. So you got to be understanding your team. You got to keep talking to them. In one way or another, do one-to-ones, go, have a chat with them, ask, for, a coffee chat, things like that. But you got to keep talking to them, like doing stand-ups, things like that. And there's a really nice book as well called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This is a really, really nice book. And one of the habits here is to seek first to understand, then to be understood. And this has a really, really good importance. But it's very hard as a software engineers to us because we are those human beings who can solutionize things, right? We can create solutions. We can solve problems. And it's very hard to try to actually ask questions and understand because once we do that, at some level, we will be saying, I know the solution. But it's very hard to keep that into yourself and try to understand more and more. Other aspect here is the flexibility. So it matters, how flexible you are as an individual, as a leader, and it has a lot of effect in your team's effectiveness. So there is no cookie-cutter approach to leadership. So you can't just say like, okay, I'm a leader who is just stepping back and letting the team do whatever they want to do. This might work, in some situations, some contexts. But if you have different, people in your team, they need maybe different caring, right? So there is a good framework called SL2. It gives you some understanding on like where each individual actually lies into. Like, are you a confident person who can just go and implement the things? Are you a solution, creator, or can you just solve one problem if I give it to you with definition and how to solve it, and you are just going to be doing that? So this can happen like if you are a new graduate. You will be at that level. But if you are a very senior person, senior developer, then you might be just getting on with like getting an ambiguous problem and disambiguating it and then solving that would be your maybe ability. But you got to understand this though, right? So it's not like you will have one style of leadership and apply it to everyone. You got to be applying different styles to each individual. So this is really about understanding again. Like you got to understand your team members. And you got to know the rules of the game. That's one of the really important things. You got to understand the company objective. You got to understand where the business is trying to get to, what the team is trying to do as well. And this, again, like, if you put yourself into systems thinking, then this gets, again, easy. Like, understanding the journey of a customer, right? So you might be building a product that a customer is seeing after 5 or 6 steps after within the workflow they started out, right? So you got to understand that, like how that customer coming to us, how is that finding that product, and how are they buying it, how are they evaluating that product, things like that. And then once they actually buy the product, what is the invoice? How does that look like? Things like that. It really matters to understand it at a high level, not in details. Like you don't want to care about the details of like how that invoice is being produced. But once you understand these things, then you can actually make a lot more informed decisions about the process. And striving to actually understanding the impact is also really important. And we kind of gave an example on this with the hypothesis-driven development approach. But this goes beyond that. Like understanding all the numbers, trying to measure everything is a really good habit as well. And there's this good book, again, like how to measure everything is trying to convince you that you can actually measure anything. It's a really good book as well. But essentially, I think you gotta be part of the team as a leader to affect that effectiveness, right? And you gotta be leading by example as well. So you can't just go and try to, hide in your desk and then try to make the team do whatever they want to do. So you gotta take those like riskiest areas and then try to help with those things. So, but there is a balance here again. You gotta find out. Actually, you can't just take this story looks beautiful, I'm going to just go and take that. You can't just do that. Maybe other parts need more help, so you got to jump out there. So you have a lot of context switch that you are making. And again, as I mentioned, the balance is the key here again. So you got to be able to balance the situations. So one example here is that you might be delegating tasks to your team members, right? So delegation is a really, really good tool which should be in your toolbox every day as a leader, because you can't do all the jobs. So for example, I'm here now at a conference and I have duties at my workplace, at my organization that I can't do right now. So I had to delegate those things to other team members so that they can get on with those things, so that business is not blocked me being away. So thinking of that, you can't just go and delegate everything now without actually thinking about, who that person, who are you delegating to task to. If they don't know the actual, if they don't have the actual skills, or if they don't understand the context, then you got to give that context. You got to help them out how they can acquire those skills as well. So you got to act with a balance here. So you can't just go and say that I'm going to be delegating every task now, as well. And again, I think I want to emphasize this, that your impact is amplified as a leader. So once you understand that, everything falls from that point on, I think, into places. So again, there's a really good book here called The Grit that I quite enjoyed reading it a few times. Gives you a framework to actually understand whenever you are going to be making a decision, how that might affect the business. So once you make a decision within a product team for the product, you might not know that affects the support team, that affects the marketing team, that affects the sales team. So you got to understand all of that story of like, when I make this decision, who's going to get affected? And what is that knock-on effect on that? So yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about today. Thanks for listening again. Hope this was helpful. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any for me. I think we have like 6 more minutes to go. Go.
So you talked about the perfect scenario in a team.
Did I?
How do you deal with, let's say, difficult, developers, or more like passive-aggressive developers, and you try to give them tasks, and how is there ways to let them do what they're supposed to do, and without being patronizing?
Yeah, so there are definitely ways. So, for example, the coaching techniques I mentioned is one of those things. But again, it comes back to that, understanding them, right? So you are again like making an assumption here that they, possibly you are talking about a hypothetical situation. But if there is a person who is being like, not approachable, then you got to ask yourself, why are they not approachable, right? Maybe they have a problem at home. Maybe they have family problems. Maybe they have issues at work. Maybe they are pissed off by something that someone else has done at the company and you are not aware of that. So starting with those questions, like, understanding it, having those conversations in a friendly manner is the start of that journey. But once you understand it, I think it will just fall into places. But there is no cookie cutter approach to that, unfortunately. It's like, I can't tell you, like, do this and it will all resolve it, because every human is different. Every mental model is different. But yeah, you got to understand those situations. I mean, but it might come to a point that you genuinely have evidence to support that actually that person is being just not approachable, just for sake of not being approachable, right? Then you can take different measures at that point. You can talk to different people as well. One thing I haven't mentioned actually here is that, so I'm acting as a tech lead, but I'm not on my own. So I have my manager who is helping me a lot on this journey. So whenever I have these type of situations, I go to them as their help, or talk to my peers. There are 10 or 15, 10 or 11 tech leads at Redgate. So I try to talk to them, understand, like, have you had a situation like this before? How did you deal with that? Things like that. But I am happy to talk afterwards if you have specific examples as well. Maybe I can give you some ideas. Any other questions? Cool. Awesome then. Thanks a lot for coming and listening to me. Hope this was helpful.